Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. And I'm feeling really excited today for absolutely no reason. Maybe it's because football's back. This is the last week, or I guess this is the week. Football is back. Preseason's coming up quickly. And I'm back on the New York groove, baby. And I feel like Saquon Barkley and this Giants team is going to take us, hopefully, to another level. We're going to talk about Saquon's progression, where he's at right now, what we expect from him. Come week one, should we expect him to be starting and everything in between, what went on today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Joe Looney. I know Anthony covered him yesterday, but I wanted to give my thoughts on, that signing there and if, Austin Ryder should still be in the conversation from the Kansas City Chiefs. Kadarius Tony making a comeback. Alfred Morris, the old man, knees barely hanging on. We're going to talk about him for a second. Maybe Corey Clements, because he's a guy that I stumbled upon and was like, maybe that could be a player that does a little bit more for us than we anticipated, Anthony. But, before we dive into all the good stuff, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing real good, and I'm starting to feel that excitement too. We've got 12 days until the first official preseason game, which I'm super excited for. I'll be watching that presumably on NFL Game Pass, but I do have a real beef with NFL Game Pass. I'm sure many of the listeners know Game Pass took away all coaches' film, which makes it really difficult for us to do certain film breakdowns or other types of content. For now, it'll be back hopefully by the start of the season, but very frustrating. But anyway, I'm annoyed by that, but I'm really excited to get back to Giants football and get to watch these guys in preseason. Of course, training camp is still going on. They didn't practice yesterday. It was Sunday. They get Sundays off, but on Saturday they were out in Newark in front of a bunch of high school football players. And over the weekend, the Giants had a really busy one. They had a busy weekend. They made a couple signings, had a couple players in for visits. So Alex missed all that, and now we get a chance to recap it, talk about it. He can give his takes, and I'll give a little bit more of mine since I already kind of gave them, but I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I did miss Saturday. And of course, everything happened on Saturday, Joe Looney and all these signings and visits and whatnot. And the one day of the year, that I'm not available because we have something called Lobster Fest. And essentially, it is we celebrate Jerry Garcia's birthday, Grateful Dead. I don't know if you're old enough to know that, big musician. And, we celebrate his birthday. And basically, we just crush lobsters and brews all day long and have a big party. And I missed, a bunch of stuff. But, when you're having lobsters and crush and brews all day long, I don't care. Joe Looney, I'll talk about you tomorrow. You're not that important to me right now. But, I am excited about this signing for a couple of reasons. And one of them is we needed depth. That Shane Lemieux injury last week really opened our eyes to how thin this unit is. And I think it did it to management. Everybody thinks it's all good and dandy until one injury happens before, preseason even starts, and suddenly you're a little bit on your heels. You're wondering what happens if Zach Fulton goes? What happens if Will Hernandez gets hurt? Now we're down to reserves already. We're down to Kenny Wiggins, who nobody even knew before he started taking first team snaps when Shane Lemieux got injured. So this is the problem with our offensive line. They're very thin. One injury and things fall apart at the seams. So we needed to bring in somebody. Joe Looney is a guy who has experience at center, has experience at guard. Is he a good player? Some might say he's good. Some might say he's not good. I'd say he's about average. I'd say he's not a power. He's not a mauler. He's more of a finesse-based blocker. If you're going up against bigger defensive lines, he's going to get overwhelmed. He's going to need help. That's the kind of player Joe Looney is. He's decent in pass protection, not very good in run blocking. And that's kind of where the Giants are looking. He just has experience with Jason Garrett, right? They looked to sign him last year. He ended up sticking with Dallas, ended up playing a good amount of time when Travis Frederick, was out. But for the most part, Joe Looney is a reserve guy. Do I expect him to compete for starting snaps? Absolutely. Do I think he's going to win a starting job? Absolutely not. In fact, I prefer if he didn't. I want Shane Lemieux to be, that our guy at left guard. I want Will Hernandez to be our guy at right guard. And I really like Nick Gates at center. Some people might not. I do. 6'5". He's a little bit big for a center, but he proved to me last year that he can hold up. He's a mauler. He's strong as hell. Anyone that has the balls to stand up to Aaron Donald, I want as my center. I want on my team. And that's the thing, though. He's the exact opposite in terms of qualities and strengths compared to Looney. Looney's a little bit more finesse-based. Nick Gates is a mauler. He's a power guy. He's capable of pushing those guys. He's capable of holding it down against big nose tackles like those Dexter Lawrences of the world. That's where Shane Lemieux struggles, though. He's not very good against the power option. So the Giants now are looking at this offensive line saying, let the best man win. Let's bring in a couple of competitors. And that brings you to Austin Reiter from Kansas City. Is he worth, taking a flyer on? I've seen mixed reviews on Austin Reiter. A lot of fans that, of Kansas City, I've seen saying he sucks. I've seen that, they're like, okay, Austin Reiter, really bad in run blocking. And his pass protection, while he had some decent grades, Patrick Mahomes simply masked a lot of the deficiencies on that offensive line because of how good a quarterback he is. The interior offensive line is always plays less of a big role than the tackles. The tackles are really what need to hold it down. We saw that last season in the Super Bowl. When Patrick Mahomes didn't have his starting tackles, the line collapsed. But when they had them, they were good, and he was good. That interior line struggled as well, and Austin Reiter, I think was kind of just masked. The deficiencies were masked by the guards, and Looney is especially him. I watched a breakdown from Vach Lombardi on YouTube, and he was like, just basically the title is literally Surviving Joe Looney. That's literally the title of the video, and it's not good. It's not good. And after watching that, even just 10 minutes of it, I was like, okay, this is not a guy you want to be starting. He's a guy you have as a last resort to be starting. And that's where my mentality is with this. That's why I'm not totally opposed to bringing in Austin Reiter, who's probably cheap. He's a 2-year starter. He's won a Super Bowl. You might as well bring in some more experience. Joe Looney, a guy who really needed help last year from Zach Martin, all-pro guard. He needed a lot of help, and I think that the guards are going to be asked to do that. But one thing that the offensive line this year has an advantage of is they changed their schematics. They changed the strategy from being a vertical-based pass pro fundamental kind of situation. So instead of going straight up, they're really adapting to more of a slide technique so that they're going to be helping each other. Instead of being isolated on an island, the offensive line will be kind of strategized to help each other, to slide over, giving Daniel Jones a little bit more room to move out of the pocket, a little bit more help in the trenches. So I think that'll be a big positive compared to what Mark Colombo tried to do last year, Anthony. But in terms of the offensive line, Matt Pert, back from the PUP list. Jonathan Harrison back from the PUP list. These guys slowly getting healthy. Shane Lemieux, Joe Judge said day to day instead of week to week. So seeing all these guys come back, are you getting a little bit more optimistic on this offensive line? We don't want to see the injuries, but how are you feeling at this point? I know the offense has struggled up to this point in training camp. Again, just training camp. What are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit more optimistic about the offensive line. The only source of optimism that I had on the offensive line throughout the entirety of this offseason, since the Giants really didn't make any improvements, in terms of personnel, the only source of optimism that I've had is the fact that I think the coaching staff is really, really good for the offensive line. I love the hiring of Rob Sale. I think he's going to be phenomenal. Former offensive coordinator / offensive line coach at Louisiana. He's only 41 years old. He's never coached in the NFL, and I think that's exactly what the Giants need, is a young guy who understands how to coach young guys, because he's been coaching college guys for 10 years. So I think he's got the experience, and that will translate really well to guys like Matt Parrott, who's in his second season, Andrew Thomas in his second season, Nick Gates in his third or fourth season, and Will Hernandez in his fourth season, Shane Lemieux only in his second season. So that skill set translates really well there. And then, of course, you might have some concerns like, oh, he's a young coach. He's never coached in the NFL. What about that? Maybe that inexperience could come back to haunt him. Sure, you could say that, but the Giants built a team on the offensive line. They've got Ben Wilkerson, who was here last year. He's the assistant offensive line coach. He's a pretty good coach as well, another really young guy. But then they also have Pat Flaherty, who they hired this offseason to be their offensive consultant. He's been in the NFL for 40 years coaching players. He's coached offensive line, he's coached other positions, but mainly offensive line, and he coached the Giants offensive line when they won one of those Super Bowls with Eli Manning. So they kind of have a whole sounding board, a whole team, and Freddie Kitchens as well was promoted to senior offensive assistant this offseason, and his number one job, according to Joe Judge, is to make sure that the offensive line is connected with the playbook and the scheme and the offensive coordinator. He's kind of like that middleman that keeps those two on the same page and keeps everything in sync. So they've got 5 different men, different coaches, making sure that this offensive line develops and plays well. So that was my source of optimism. That source of optimism is still there, but my source of fear is, of course, the lack of depth and the lack of talent, general talent, or at least proven talent on the offensive line. Because someone did correct me in the comments and said that, how can you say that these guys don't have talent if they've barely even played yet? I'm like, okay, sure, that's true, but they don't have any proven talent. I think we can all agree on that. They have not proven themselves. If anything, so far they haven't been good players, so they haven't proven that they're good players yet either. So let's see if they can prove themselves this year. I do think that offensive line, coaching staff is really going to help them hopefully reach their potential and become talented, good players. But of course, when Shane Lemieux went down with that injury, we really had a wake-up call, and we're like, wow, there is no depth on this offensive line. If one of these guys gets hurt, we are screwed. This is going to be shredded Swiss cheese. And honestly, I think the Giants had that wake-up call as well, as Alex mentioned. I think management saw that when Shane Lemieux went down. They said, we need to get some more bodies in here, and then they went ahead and they did that. Joe Looney, they're going to visit with Austin Reiter, who I do like a lot. I think that he would be a good center, and then you would have to move Gates back to guard, but Gates can really play anywhere. That's the beauty of Nick Gates. The Giants have always said that they love that he can play anywhere. So they've been training him at center again this offseason, but they've also been having him take snaps at guard. So they're obviously prepared for a scenario where they find the better center and need him to play guard. So I don't know. I think that there are reasons for optimism, but like I said, the lack of depth and the lack of proven talent on this offensive line is obviously a reason for concern. I mean, we have fans in the comments reminding us every day as well that this could be the reason that this season doesn't go well is because of the offensive line. So it's funny because you got one side of the fan base who's really optimistic, and then you got one side of the fan base that's really pessimistic about the offensive line. So hopefully we land somewhere in the middle of those two outcomes, the great and the terrible. Hopefully it's somewhere in the middle. If this offensive line can be average with the group of playmakers that we have, and hopefully Daniel Jones takes that next step, playoff team. But if they're a horrible offensive line again, and Daniel Jones can't develop because of it, we're looking at that Chicago Bears first-round pick and saying, dear God, Chicago, please lose every single game you can.
I mean, that's what I'm hoping. I'm looking at Trey Lance right now with San Francisco, and I'm like, that kid looks freaking amazing. He has some really nice passes, looking great. And then Justin Fields, haven't heard much about Justin Fields. So I'll have to bring on our guy Usaid from Bears camp.
Because he's not starting. You got
he's not starting, right? I mean,
starting there.
Look, if you got Andy Dalton starting right now, that's a good sign that Justin Fields isn't blowing things up right now. But Trey Lance, they're already saying he could be taking snaps from Jimmy Garoppolo by the midway point in the season. They're committed to Jimmy. Like, they paid Jimmy. Like, they don't want to have to replace Jimmy. But Trey Lance, if he pushes it, they'll take it. They'll take the job from him. But, with the Giants, it all boils down to this offensive line once again. Every freaking year, it always comes down to the offensive line. And I do want to talk about two different things. One of them being that the offense has struggled up to this point in training camp. People seem to forget that our defense is a top 5 unit. No crap they're going to be struggling against this unit. This is like the iron sharpens iron mentality. Right now, it's like iron sharpens a plank of wood mentality. The Giants' offense is a plank of wood, and the defense is a hard piece of iron. And this is like, they're just getting accustomed to playing against a great defense that knows what they're doing, that has a ton of chemistry, that's been working all offseason to improve. And this is the first time the offense is really coming together, everyone at the same time. And, when the whole secondary is working out, and then you have some offensive linemen over here, Saquon Barkley is not even with the team yet, really. He's not like practicing with the ones. Daniel Jones has been working on the side and training. Sometimes he did some stuff with some receivers. It's not the same. And I think we have to give them some time. It always comes up into my head, David Tyree. The day before the Super Bowl, the practice they had, he dropped everything. Dropped every single pass, couldn't do anything right, and then he made one of the biggest catches in Super Bowl history. You don't know what's going to happen until game day. I don't give a crap what's happening during practice. I see so many dumb reports and so many dumb headlines that just make me cringe. It makes me want to crawl back into my mother's womb and wish I never saw any of this crap in my life. This is ridiculous. It's just an unbelievable, just the New York media, once again, having so much negativity to display. And that doesn't mean the offense is going to be great. Doesn't mean they're going to be good. But let's not be so premature to make rash assumptions when we have nothing to base it off of, aside from Daniel Jones missed a couple of passes wearing shorts. This is the same concept. Like when Davis Webb was slinging passes wearing shorts and he was completing passes and everyone was like, oh, he could be the future of this team. Daniel Jones missing a couple of passes and wearing shorts in training camp means nothing to me because right now Davis Webb doesn't even have a job in the NFL. Daniel Jones is a starting quarterback in the NFL. Missing a couple of passes means absolutely nothing to me. So, I want to move forward. I want to see what happens during training camp, get some action on the board.
Before we move forward, I do got to say, Diggy pointed this out on Twitter. One thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand, when we're saying that the Giants offense is struggling in training camp, the Giants are only doing primarily red zone drills. So of course the defense is outperforming the offense. I don't know why this is being left out of this narrative. It's a shrunken field. The offense has significantly less room to work with than the defense does. The defense is always at an advantage in the red zone. The Giants are just working on the red zone offense because they sucked in the red zone last year, and it's not something that a lot of teams find easy to do, is score in the red zone. So that's why the defense is, taking the lion's share of W's so far through training camp. But once they start doing those 11-on-11s and, FanFest is next week and they're going to have that scrimmage practice, the blue versus red team, you're going to see a full field offense versus a full field defense, and things are going to change drastically, and you're probably going to see major improvement from the offense at that point.
Yeah, and we're not even in full pads yet, by the way. Full pads come on next week. Or rather, I think on Wednesday, maybe, a couple days from now.
I think tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow they put the pads on. I can't wait.
Tomorrow. They got pads coming on. That's when we're going to see more physicality. Right now they're just going through the motions. They're just establishing the base concepts, the base, plays, just trying to get the timing down between Kenny and the receivers and Daniel Jones. That's really it. That's it. Like, there's not much else to it. We're going to see better stuff. It'll happen. It's going to be a little bit slow of a process because the offense is trying to catch up after such a bad last year and so many new faces and new coaches and establishing a new system and scheme. It's going to take time, but we're on the right track. I'm not worried yet. If it comes to the second, third preseason game and we're really struggling and we can't score and we can't do anything right, then I'm going to be a little bit more worried. I'm going to be a little concerned. But right now, this is the last. I'm the last person, as positive as I am, that's going to be concerned about this and negative about this, because it's just a headline creator. It's just a clickbait, absolute BS headline creator. That's how I feel personally about it. Other reporters might think differently. That's totally fine. If there's reason to believe that this offense is going to be bad because it's the fourth practice, then by all means, that's your opinion. I don't really care. But mine is a lot different. So let's talk about Saquon Barkley for a minute. Saquon making tremendous progress. Joe Judge has been really excited about his progress and what he's been able to show the team so far. He has been working on the side, but I saw a ridiculous catch today. He looks like he's cutting well. He looks like he's jumping and making all the right movements with his knee to be able to come back in full force. I think week 1 is a realistic expectation, Anthony. What do you think?
Yeah, I always thought that he would be ready for week 1. I just don't think his snap count is going to be at starting level week 1. Well, it will be starting level, but it won't be what we're used to seeing from Saquon. He's usually out there every single goddamn snap that the Giants play on offense, and that could be part of the reason that his body keeps tearing down here and there throughout the seasons. But I think week 1 of this year, you're not going to see that. I think you're going to see him probably play like 60% of snaps rather than 95% of snaps, just that slight difference right there. And that could be pretty impactful on the Giants offense to not have him out there for every play. But I think that it's important that the Giants don't rush him back, because we mentioned this a few episodes ago. The Giants are playing long term, meaning that they're not trying to get him in for the start of the regular season. They're trying to make sure that he's around for the playoff push at the end of the regular season. You know what I'm saying? So they want him on the field for weeks 17, 18, 19, and 20, trying to get into the Super Bowl. That's when they want him at his full strength and full health. But having him at full strength in week 1 isn't necessarily all that important. You just ease him back into the lineup over the course of the first few weeks of the season to make sure that he remains healthy for the rest of the year, and I think that's really key. So I do think that he will be playing week 1, especially because he's making tangible progress, according to Joe Judge. That's the quote he said, and he does look pretty good. I saw a video of him running around at in the back of the field at training camp, making some cuts and making some catches. He looks really good. So I do think that he will be ready for week 1. I'm not sure how much he's going to play in week 1, and honestly, I don't really know if I want him to play all that much in week 1. I think that the Giants are doing the right thing here, taking it slow, taking it easy with him, and focusing more on having him healthy for the second half of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I think that easing him in, not rushing things, unless he's 100% healthy, it's going to take a couple weeks for him to get his sea legs come, the regular season, because it's different. Football moves are different than practice moves. You're going a lot harder. You're cutting a lot stronger. It takes a little bit of time to get your body adjusted. The first couple of weeks, the players are always like, I could barely move the next day. And, you're getting hit by people and they're putting weight on you. It's going to take a little bit of time for Saquon to feel confident on that knee. So I think 50% of snaps week 1, week 2 would make sense to me. And then week 3, ramp it up to 75, week 4, back to 100%. That's how I prefer it to go. I don't think that, he can make an impact with 50% of snaps, because Devontae Booker, I feel pretty good about him. He's a starting level running back, low end starting running back, but he can get it done. And we have the receivers to get it done. Our defense is incredible. So I feel pretty confident that our team can hold up while Saquon eases his way back, because we have the receiving threats now. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is Kadarius Tony. And essentially, he's making that comeback too. He was working with Joe Judge, returning some onside kicks, just easing into the special teams portion of what he's capable of doing. And I think that, being on the hands team, getting introduced early to the special teams unit will be where he can make an impact aside from being a receiver. Joe Judge loves to have those multi-purpose guys, and I think Kadarius Tony is one of them, Anthony. Do you think that he might even start the year as our primary punt returner, or do you think Jabril Peppers might have it locked?
I think that's going to really depend on what we see from Kadarius Tony in practice, because we haven't seen anything yet. We haven't seen him practice at all. We've seen him work on the side with trainers as he's still working back from being on the COVID list, but we haven't seen much. So I feel like we can't really make a set answer on Kadarius Tony yet, because we have to see where the Giants even are practicing him once he's practicing. Like, are they having him return punts and kicks? And of course, once we get to preseason, is he going to be returning punts in the preseason games? That'll obviously be a key determinating factor as to whether or not he's returning punts in the regular season. So I think it's a little too soon to tell what the Giants special teams starting unit is going to look like, especially at the punt returner spot. We can project and we can make predictions, and I do predict that Kadarius Tony will be the starting punt returner over the course of the season as they try to preserve Jabril Peppers and make sure that he doesn't get hurt, because he did get hurt, I believe, on a punt at one point 2 seasons ago, and that was really costly. He is one of the best defenders on this team, so we got to make sure that he's healthy, or as healthy as he possibly can be. So I hope to see Kadarius Tony out there as a starting punt returner, but I guess we really can't know whether or not he will be just yet until we see him practice, because we haven't really seen him practice much just yet.
Yeah, that's essentially it, guys. So that's our update for you guys for training camp on Monday. We'll be covering, obviously, with pads coming on tomorrow and this week. That should be really exciting. Hopefully, knock on wood, everyone stays healthy. I'm really hyped to see what this offense can do moving forward, and really hopefully put this narrative to bed that they're struggling and Daniel Jones is missing throws and all that stuff. I want to see some positivity. I want them to put it on the field and really convince us that they're ready to take that step forward. But make sure to subscribe below on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. As always, my friends, we'll keep you guys updated with everything coming out as always, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.